Star. I work with OIT, and I've been heavily involved with the enterprise Drupal implementation. And we've had a lot of people who have been asking questions about using GitHub. And so Gabe and I decided that maybe this would be a good opportunity to do a little bit of a demonstration show and tell on how we use GitHub. I'm going to focus pretty much on using the enterprise implementation, but a lot of the parts that I'm using are probably interchangeable for anyone who needs to use GitHub for pretty much any reason. Before this class, before we started this, it's not a class, it's a presentation or whatever. Feel free to interrupt me, by the way. If you go to GitHub, github.com, one of the things I needed to do was install GitHub on my machine. And so if you're on a Mac, it'll say install GitHub for your Mac. But that's a lot of the things I'm going to show you today are using the command line tool, and those were installed by installing this. And so this is probably one of the first things that you'll need to do before you can start using it. Once you have it installed, what I figured I would do today is walk through a little bit of the process for installing Drupal, the enterprise Drupal on your local machine and setting it up so that you can push your site code to your repository. And hopefully along the way we can answer a lot of the questions that you have. So one of the first things that you would do is you need to log into GitHub. That does a couple of things. First, if you haven't done it before, it creates your account. I'm already authenticated, as we can see. And you need to set up the repository that you're going to be sharing your that you're going to be using to push your code. If you're doing anything that's meant to be like owned by the university, you're doing it for university business, we really strongly recommend that you start by setting up an organization. So if I were to come, I'm logged in here, and if I were to just come and click on create a new repository at this point, I would be creating it, and it would be mine, my own. But if you create an organization, it allows you to share ownership of it. And since if you're building something for the university, then you probably want to share it with a coworker or other people within your group. And so the way you do that is if you come to the I believe it's here, you scroll down, so you click on your ID, and you scroll down, and you get an option to create an organization. So I'll create an organization. I'll call it Drupal L. I don't like capitals. And I'll go ahead and create it. By default, I'm an owner. And Gabe, what's your ID? ORMSBY? Oh. And so I'll see Gabe, and I'll add Gabe as well. And so now Gabe has, I need to confirm that I do want to add Gabe. And so you can add whatever coworkers you want at this point. So once I do this, Gabe will have full rights in order to manage this repository the same as I do, since I'm adding him as an owner. You do have the ability to add people with different permissions levels as well. So I'm going to say I'm done here and move on to the organization. And so at this point, I can create a repository that will belong to our organization, the Drupal L1. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the option to create the new repository. And at this point, we would give it a name. And you can give it a name, any name that's appropriate to you. Okay, well, I should back up here because I'm taking a step in a different direction. All along the way, what we've told people is to get your site code, you want to fork the site code from our repository to yours. So if I go to here and I go to the site repository, feel free if I'm getting if you have any questions to ask. And you can see that actually a lot of people have forked it. I think my understanding is the original idea with forking in GitHub is that it's a way of, oh, somebody's got some really cool code, I want to take it, I want to do stuff with it, and then I want to push it back. And that's really what the idea with forking is. And you'll notice that we have a bunch of branches that are here. And the problem with forking is you get the entire repository, you get all the branches carried down with you. And you may be asking, well, what is a branch? Somebody asked me that question this morning. So what you use GitHub for is it's pretty much a collaboration tool that allows you to share code and collaborate on projects. And a branch is essentially just a copy of your code. So let's say that you have a site that's you're ready to go live, and so you would push that to one branch, but you want to continue developing on it. You don't want to be developing on your live code. So you'd create a copy of the code, which is called another branch. And that branch is essentially the same code, and then you can do whatever you need to do with it. And when the time comes that you want to move that live, you could merge those two together. So that's really what a branch is essentially just a copy of your code that's stored in a different location, but there's means to combine the two together. But I'm not going to show you the forking method because the problem with the forking method is you get all of these branches carried over with you. And so I'm going to show you a little bit more of a clean way to do it. The reason we just use the forking method for in our documentation is it really is the easiest way to do it, but I don't believe in the easy way. So I'm going to create a new repository, and I'll just call it Git demo, and go ahead and I'll create the repository. And so now that I've done this, what I want to do next is I want to get the repository down onto my local machine so that I can work on it. So I'm going to come over here, and I need to hide that so I can see what I'm typing. And actually, I'm going to jump back for a second. So I'm going to walk through the process of setting up the U of M's enterprise Drupal on your machine. So we have the URL for the platform repository widely published. And so what I've done ahead of time is I've just chosen the option to download it to a zip. And so if we look at my desktop, we'll see that I actually have the platform code here, and then here's the unzipped version. So when you look at it, what we have is this top level stuff is stuff that Acquia requires. But for you to run it on your local machine, what you really want is this level. So you go into the www level, and you pretty much take all of that and put it where you want it to be. So I need to go there. And I'll create a new folder for I'll just move all of that in there. And so now I've got this first part of my folder set up for me to install Drupal on my machine. So in ls, I'll see that the Git demo is here, so I'll cd in there. And now the way the enterprise implementation is set up, we have we provide the site code, but really all that you should be editing is, or we have the platform code. All that you should be editing is the site code, and so that's where you want your repository to be, is on the site level. So from in here, I'm going to cd into the sites, and now I want to pull my repository in, even though it's an empty repository at this point. So I'll take the URL for the repository, and I'll just do a, oops, I don't want that open. Git clone with the URL, and then I'll give it a destination, so what the folder name is I want to clone it into. And for those of you who know Drupal, I want to put it in the default because I don't have any other sites going here. So I'll go ahead and do that. And like I said ahead of time, I do have an empty repository here, so that's why it's warning me that I've got an empty repository. So if I cd into sites, or I'm sorry, cd into default, I'll get a notification. This is telling me that I'm on the master branch, and it lets me know that I'm working in a inside of a repository. So so at this point, what I would want to do is this workflow is a little bit entirely up to you, but the way I think that the workflow would work best is if you do your work in the develop branch. So I'm going to create a new branch from here, and I will call it, let's see, how does it work? It's good. So git checkout is essentially a way of saying I want to work on a different branch than the one I'm working on. The -b tag, and I'm not sure if I have the syntax here entirely right, so somebody tell me if I'm wrong. The -b branch essentially says I want to create it, so I don't have a develop branch yet, and so then I want to go ahead and give it the location where I want to put it. If I don't give it a location, it's going to use the default name for no, actually, that's the name of the branch. I'm 2 steps behind myself. That's the name of the branch that I want to create. So I'll go ahead and click that. And it'll essentially say that it's switched to a new branch called develop. And so so this is where I'll go ahead and put my code. So I took the liberty ahead of time to download the site code. I thought I unzipped it, but maybe not. Yep, here it is. So by the same method that I downloaded the platform code, I also downloaded the site code. So I'll go ahead and carry this over. And to sites, default. And so I'm going to come back here now. I've put a bunch of files into my repository. And so if I just hit enter now, it'll say that I've got 4 files that are there, and then so I added 4. None have been. The delta is 0, and then the number that have been removed are 0. So this line is essentially providing me with information about what's changed since the last time I hit enter or Git was looked at the repository. If I do a git status, I'm actually not sure what it'll show me here. It's going to show me the files that have changed. So this is going to give me an idea as to what's different now than it was before. So if I want to start tracking these files, what I need to do is add them to the repository. So the first thing I would do is a git add, and the last time some of these files were edited, they were edited on a bad text editor, and so so the reason why all of these errors or warnings are here is because the line, it's essentially using a control line feed instead of a regular line feed, or it's a Windows versus Unix kind of thing. So you can ignore that, is what I'm trying to say. And so now what's happened is it's saying, okay, well, I have a bunch of these files that have been added to the repository that I'm aware of, but I haven't actually committed them to the repository yet. So now it's essentially I'm at a point where I want to commit them and add them to the repository, as in, yes, these are changes that I want to keep. So I would do a git commit, and then I always want to add a message, so it's -m, and I would say something like add site files. And the message is really helpful to yourself later on if you want to figure out what you had done on a previous commit. You could see what you were doing or what the different changes were. And so now that this is done, I want to do a git push. And I'm going to get an error here, but I don't remember the right syntax to do it correctly the first time. So git push essentially says so far I've done all of these changes. Everything's been done on my local machine, but I haven't actually pushed anything up to the repository yet. So if I come and look at the repository and refresh it, it's still going to pretty much say, hey, I don't have anything, I'm empty. So what I want to do with the git push is I actually want to push the stuff from my local machine up into the U of M GitHub. And the error that I'm getting here, usually git push is good enough for what I'm doing, but because I created a new branch and the server is not aware of this branch, I need to essentially use what they're showing here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this. And I'll paste it in. Is this making sense so far? I feel like I'm okay. So essentially, it's giving me information that, hey, I've got a new branch called develop, and that I was able to upload all of my code from here to the repository. So if I come back here now and look at it on the server, I will see that I have all of my information is here, and that I did the push about a minute ago. So that's essentially my first step. Is I now have a repository that's on the U of M GitHub, on the enterprise GitHub. But I mean, that's essentially a start. So if you want to get it running on your local machine, one of the things that we have steps for is that you need to make changes to your settings.php file. And we could certainly make those changes at this point and then push them up. But the problem is the settings.php file right now is set up in such a way that we really don't want it to change. We want to keep it the way it is. So I want to set GitHub up so that it will not, it won't respect changes to the settings.php file. It'll ignore any changes. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to create the file. And Git has a special file called .gitignore, and the .gitignore file essentially says, hey, you know what? These are files. I know I may be changing these files, but I don't really want you to do anything with them. You can ignore these. And so that's the file that I'm going to create now. And you'll notice when I created it, it's saying, hey, I have one file that I've added, and we do probably want to keep syncing that file. It doesn't matter what you do with it, but I'm going to sync it just so we'll take care of it. But before I do, I'm going to come into, if I can find the right location. So I'm going to come in and edit this file. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to ignore changes to my settings.php file. Settings. The other thing that you're going to end up creating that will cause trouble if you push it to repository is the files directory. Because in the Acquia environment, we do special things with it. They essentially store their files directory in another location, and they have a symlink to the file share. And so if you upload it, you overwrite that symlink, and well, essentially you break things. So you don't want to be uploading your files directory into your repository. So I'm going to tell it to ignore files as well, or the files directory. At this point, I'll save it. If I come back here again and hit enter, well, it's still got the one file, so I'll do a git add. And so I've added it to the repository, and then I'll do a git commit. And you'll notice the color changed. It means that I have commits that have been made to the repository that haven't actually been pushed. So I can go ahead and push it. So now I can go ahead and I can make changes to my settings.php file. And I don't have that code handy that we tell people to use on it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Otherwise, I'll just make some other change. Yep, there it is. And we also tell you to comment out some lines, so I'll just do that quick. So now I've made some changes to my settings.php file, which is what you would need to do in order to install and run Drupal locally on your machine. But you don't want them to be, you don't want these changes on the server. If I come back now, you'll see if I hit enter, I did something wrong. Somewhere, and if this had been working the way it's supposed to, when I updated the git ignore, it should have said to ignore that file. Let me see if I
save it.
I thought I did. Do I have it spelled correctly? S-E-T-T. Any Git experts in here know what I did wrong?
My guess is that you already have, that you created the settings on PHP before you created the git ignore.
That's possible.
So it tracked it initially.
So here's another option then. So it's very possible because when I did it this morning, I did it differently. Is if I go to, if I look in this Git folder, there is a file somewhere. Where is it? It's under info, I think. There's this file called git exclude, and so git ignore says I really want to just ignore all of these files. The exclude says, hey, you know what? These files change so infrequently that I don't want you to make these changes every time they change. And this is when I tested it this morning, I did it this way. So this way it should work better. I'll save that. Because it's in the .git folder, where Git does a lot of its internal administration, it will it won't want to track that .exclude folder. Let me try to see what's going on here. I promise you, when I did it this morning, it worked. I just Control-Z, I just undid all of those changes. So now it's saying that the settings.php hasn't had any changes made to it. I'm a little perplexed as to why it's giving me this error now. Let me remove it from the git ignore if I've got it in the exclude. I went through this whole thing this morning and it worked the way it's supposed to. I guess I'll have to figure out why that's not working correctly, unless anyone wants to throw out another suggestion. I want to take one last quick look and make sure I've got it. In the sites folder, I've got the, oh, you know what? The git ignore is in the wrong place. Oh no, it should be in here. Yeah, it's there. That's good. All right, I'm stumped on that one. The way it's supposed to work is files that are in the git ignore or that exclude folder are supposed to be ignored so that they won't so that when you want to make changes they won't be pushed. But apparently I'm doing something wrong here, so I'll just add these changes in and so I'll move on with it, and I'll try to figure out what I'm doing wrong, and maybe we can send it out to the list. Or if somebody knows what I'm doing wrong, they can send it to the list later. So at this point, I've got, I'll go ahead and push these changes up. At this point, my local machine is pretty much ready for me to do the install of, to do an install. So if I were to come and say, you know what, I want to add one in. And I'll pick that one out, the Git demo. Well, I just have things going really well here. So what I was going to show you is that now I've got a new, essentially if you actually wanted to go through the process of doing the install. At this point, it really wants to use Internet Explorer. I don't know why. You could then move through the process of installing the U of M Drupal on your local machine. I was doing that with the Acquia desktop client, but you could pretty much use any tool that you want with it. And so it's being slow now, probably because I hit OK on it too many times. So let's go ahead and say that I've made a bunch of changes, and I'm really happy with the way things are, and I want to move them to my staging branch next. So then what you could do is I'll do a git checkout. I don't currently have the branch, so I'll do a git checkout -b again to create another branch that I'll call staging. And I don't know what changed. I'm not sure why it's telling me that the settings.php file changed.
John, I just sent you a command in chat. Check it and run it, and it should cover that.
Okay, let me open up my chat. I closed it for the demo. And do it. PIDGIN. You send it again? Really?
Hopefully, you did that to wipe out and ignore. I mean, I hope you ignore them.
Well, let's take a look. So what I'm going to do is actually, it doesn't hurt to take a look at it. So it's actually saying that this information has been reloaded by another. So what happened is when I did a git checkout of the new branch, it essentially made a copy of it. And this is something I've gotten caught on many times on my local machine, and it's something you need to be careful of is which branch you have open, because Git is actually changing your files out from underneath you if you're not careful. So I don't know if everyone else has this trouble or not, but I'm on staging right now, and so if I were to do a git checkout develop, then this file would change to whatever is in develop versus what's in staging. So I don't know where this came from, though. Oh, this may have been changed when I did the install. So anyway, so I'll go ahead and check out branch. Actually, I'm going to make a change here. And I'll go ahead and check out. Actually, I'll commit. Oh, now it's ignoring my changes to the settings.php file. So I'm going to go ahead and see what else I can do here that'll make a change to show what I want. I just added a file there, and so if I look at this, it's saying, hey, there was one file added. I can do a git status, and it'll tell me which file has been added, and I'll go ahead and commit it, or add it and commit. now if I check out my my branch, my staging branch, and I look in my file directory, that file that I was there just a moment ago is gone because I'm in a different branch. I'm looking at different stuff. So what normally would be your workflow is you move stuff from dev to stage and then you move it to the production environment. But your file, in theory, in reality, you're not going to have the same exact files in dev as you do in staging. And so when the time comes that you want to merge them together, you may want to do something like a git diff to with the other branch to show you what the changes were. So it's git diff develop, and it essentially tells me that I added a new text file, that there's essentially a file there that was added that I haven't captured the additions to. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm really comfortable. I'm good with merging my changes from my dev into my staging branch. So then you do a git merge, and essentially what I've done now is I've brought that change in. Where it gets really exciting is when you have changes in both. So I'm going to show that a little bit here. So I've got this text file that I created, and I think I already have it open. And this is staging, and I'll save it. And I'll commit. I'll add it and commit. And then I'll go into the develop branch and do the same thing. So I'm going to take this file that I've already modified, and I'm changing it in both branches just to show a little bit of what happens when you have a conflict. And now I'll see a change, so I'll do a git add, git commit. And then I'll check out staging. Checkout. And if I do a git merge at this point, I say, hey, wait a minute. I tried to merge it, but you've got a conflict. So you changed a file both in both branches, and I don't know which one you really want to keep. And so that's what the warning is. And if you do a git status, that's pretty much what it'll show you. It'll tell you which files have been changed. And this is where you need to come in and try to sort out where the conflict is. And so what Git will do, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes not very helpful, is it will give you something like this. It's saying, hey, wait a minute. In the branch I'm currently in, this is what it looks like. But in the branch I want to merge it with, this is what it looks like. So I have to decide what I want. So I'll say, you know what? I actually wanted to keep both of those. So I'll just get rid of the stuff that Git adds. And save it. And then now I have to add those changes in. Fix. And so that's where that stands. And now I'll go ahead and I'll push this up. It's, I don't remember the upstream. Just copy it. I should really switch to a Linux-based type machine. And so if I come in here now, I have to find where it is. Go ahead and refresh, and we'll see that we actually have both branches now. We've got the staging branch and our develop branch. And so then at this point we could change between them and see the differences. So for example, if I were to look at that file that I added, in staging, this will have all of those changes that I made, because essentially it's that's what I pushed to staging. But if I look at the same file in develop, it will only have the original change. Actually, I never pushed it up, so it wouldn't have any changes at all. But if I had made the git push, it would have shown that. And I think that's about most of what I wanted to tell you. I will say that git merge will assume, and this is something that can get you caught a little bit, it will assume if you have changed one file. So if you've changed a file twice, it'll say, hey, I've got a conflict. But if you've since the last time you made a change, if you changed one file but not the other, it'll assume that you want the latest one to overwrite the old one. And so usually that's a safe assumption, but that is something to be aware of as a gotcha. If for some reason you didn't actually want, when you merge something and you didn't want a file to change. At this point, I'll take questions unless there's something else that Jim or Gabe think is relevant that I should show.
Well, I want to say nobody do what John keeps doing, which is git add dot.
Oh.
Always do git add the particular files you want to add to that commit, because git add dot just adds your current path and everything descending down from it, and you may not want to include all those files in that one commit.
I'm lazy. I admit I do that.
Yeah, git add the same thing. Don't do that either. Yeah. Unless for some reason you know for a fact you want to add everything. If there's any reason you are committing a particular thing, or you don't want to add descending folders or anything, just specify your file name. Yeah, so that is I'm aware that I'm doing that here actually, but probably the better method is to specify exactly what you want to commit. That's true. Yeah.
I have a question that's on behalf of Blaine Cross, who can't be here. But he's asking what the recommended process is for using the master branch during development, and at what point you actually split one off for staging.
It's a little bit of it's a little bit of a question of what your workflow is. Most people have been doing their development on master, and then when they come to us and they say, hey, wait a minute, I'm ready to move to staging, as I had this conversation with David this morning, I say, well, you know what, you're moving to staging, do you really want to be using master on all of your branches? Because master is probably what you're going to end up using for production. And so at that point, you probably want to start branching off. And so when people get started, a lot of times they feel like, we don't want to throw too much there. So it's really a question of what your workflow is. But when you come to us and you say that you're ready to move to staging, we're going to start having a conversation about which branch you want to use, because you definitely do not want to be using the same branch in dev, staging, and production. You definitely want different branches there.
And then I guess as a follow-up, and then that should answer the question, but he's also asking you to check about merging and managing conflicts.
That's kind of, pardon?
Staging? I don't know.
One more time?
With regards to
if you're doing a strictly dev stage prod workflow, you shouldn't really have any conflicts. But if you do have a conflict, you're doing, if you're only changing your code in dev and then you move it to stage and then you move it to prod, in theory you shouldn't have any conflicts. But if you do have a conflict, it's really, and I've had a few nasty ones where I really had to struggle to figure out what's doing it. And so when you do either ahead of time you do a git def, and it'll show you the differences between the two branches. And there's a command I don't remember off the top of my head that you can Google on pretty quickly, which will tell you which files have changed, so you don't actually see all the changes, you just see which files have changed. But it's really just a matter of the person who does it needs to sort through it and figure out where things are different, where there's a conflict.
If you're doing SAS, it's not uncommon to run into conflicts with the compiled version of your CSS, and that's always a fairly safe thing to just ignore, blast it out, and recompile it, because you're not physically changing that compiled version, but it's common to run into conflicts there.
Usually I'll do that when I'm merging from one environment to another. I'll recompile it just to get rid of the conflict. Yeah.
Since a lot of Drupal site building involves not coding but configuration changes to the site in the database through GUI, adding content and adding blocks. And, is there a recommended way to move database-based content through?
That's a lot more challenging. The way we've been telling people to do it is you can do a lot of that with features, but unfortunately, features is not. It's not as it's complicated and it's not as robust as we'd like it to be. And maybe somebody for the next Drupal L meeting would be willing to get up and talk about features. I'm not willing to talk about that today, though. Unless I know somebody here has another method, but what we've been using in our environment is features. And considering the complexity of it and that features don't necessarily carry over everything that you want to carry over, it may also come to a matter of tracking your changes and doing it manually in different environments. I'd be open to a discussion on that if that's a bad idea or not. We've gone around on this topic a lot amongst ourselves, and we never really came up with a good solution. So I'll point it back to you, Link. How do you do it?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
Or move the database.
Mm-hmm.
We have a dev database and do that up. That gets tricky when you're publishing a dev database in production, especially if the production site has some sort of live content.
Yeah. I mean, that's our workflow for a new site coming live is we'll just copy the database over. Yeah. But once you have a live database, you don't want to be overwriting your...
It depends on what type of site it is. So if you've just got one content author, and it's just maybe one or two people who are putting content in production, and you can move the production site backwards and develop on it and forward. But if you've got live content being generated on your site, it's tough to finagle that. And since so much of Drupal's site building is based in the database, then some of the Git workflow is like for themes and for modules, but it's not for like the actual content of your site.
That's true.
Or configuration.
People say it's not ready for prime time, but there is the UUID module. And every record has a universal ID that can be resolved between the two.
One thing in libraries, we have kind of two different tracks going on. We have what we do right now today, and that's basically because our web development group is pretty small. We have a lot of content contributors working on adding and maintaining content on production. We have a relatively small group of developers who are adding new features and stuff. We basically would check in. Basically, anything that's in code will push through DevSafe kind of that will. Then occasionally we will move the production database back to staging and development. But before we do that, we are meeting right before we want to do that. We want to do basically a development series. Yeah. Any features you have on dev that are in the database rather than code. Basically, are there and are they ready to push through production? Do that if you need to, or expect them to go away if they're experiments that are going to
because they get overwritten.
And they get overwritten and come back anyway. So I'm in the process of doing as much as I can to move. A lot of the stuff that you can do in the UI can also be captured in views, blocks, stuff like that. So my projects have been to move as much of that into code as possible, so that less of that is in the database and stranded out of it. We don't have to kind of move other things through the UI.
Yeah.
This may be a really beginner question, but so if I understand correctly, running the Drupal locally on machine allows you to really bring up the Drupal site building interface GUI. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So actually, I took the liberty before this to install one. I wasn't sure if I was going to show much of it, but let me pull this up. So anything that you're doing in the database is, you need to really evaluate what your workflow is. We have had a few people that we've imported the database, but it gets really tricky. If you do that, you definitely have to be developing on our platform. But you can certainly, GitHub just seems to be really unhappy with me right now. Or not GitHub, but the Acquia desktop client. And I'll close that one, maybe that'll make a difference. Oh.
Restart.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I hate that it opens Internet Explorer, but I haven't been able to figure out how to get it to not do that. But essentially, I'm essentially running the entire U of M platform here on my local machine. So like I was saying, is we have had a few people who do the entire development locally and then push it up. It gets a little bit tricky, but if you do that, you absolutely have to be doing it on our platform, or you're going to have all kinds of problems. What we would probably recommend is that you do any database type of stuff in the actual environment, but any code types of things like CSS or theme changes or modules that you want to add, or you would do all of that on your local machine, and then when you're ready, you would ask us to deploy. You would push it to a repository, and we would deploy it. We have had a few groups that said, "Hey, wait a minute, you know what? We've got stuff that we've done in the database, and we want to see it." And we want to see it on our local machine while we're doing the development. And so we're more than happy to download the database and send it to you, so you can import it into your machine in order to modify, to do your theming and whatever on that database, but locally.
We have Drush access to our sites.
Locally, you do. Enterprise.
Enterprise no Drush.
The problem with it is it's all or nothing,
Yeah.
and I don't know if David would be very happy if you had access to run Drush on his sites. So, yeah.
You can use that
to not mess with anybody else's stuff.
Yeah, but there are some.
to get the database.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been thinking about that we could do is Acquia has a wide variety of APIs, and I've been playing with them, and we could probably set up an API with essentially a U of M front end to it that would allow you to do things like download your database without coming to us. So those are types of things that would probably be, right now it's just, what is the term, vaporware, but maybe in a couple of months it would be something that it doesn't look like it'd be very hard to spin something like that up. And that's definitely stuff that we had some conversations about, what we can use the API for to overcome the fact that you don't actually have Drush access or access to the Acquia cloud environment. Yeah?
So you don't have to link back or remote back to your guys' site code anymore. I think when you originally had it, you had to be a fork. If it wasn't a fork, you weren't happy.
Well, the only reason we said they had to fork it was, well, we never said they had to fork it. We gave the method of forking to get the site code as an easy method to do it. What I did here is I just downloaded it and pasted it in order to not have all those extraneous branches. As far as so you definitely need our platform code and our site code as your starting point. But from there on, you can pretty much go on your own.
The disadvantage there is you wouldn't have a link back to any changes that are being pushed into your code. Is that right?
This is where I'll jump in with an idea called remotes. And so when you're doing that, when you're typing that git command and you say git, pushes, it has that origin word there, like you're pushing the origin with your branch. Origin is the name of your remote at GitHub. But you can have multiple ones of those. And so what I do with my sites is I set up another remote that is OIT's sites repository. So you could just type git add remote and then the URL for that repository, and then I could pull from there, merge into my repository, and push to the one I'm actually using. And that's if you just like Google git remote, it's a pretty easy command to just type, and that allows you to pull from the thing that you don't have access to push to, but then push those changes to yours.
Sounds cool. Actually, I'm looking.
And that's actually if you run. If you are in a situation where you're going to run multiple sites that maybe you'll have different repositories for, it might be a good idea to like have your own sort of separate parent that inherits from OIT, and then your other sites can inherit from that using that same remote path.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Earlier you were saying that the files are actually stored in a separate place.
On the Acquia environment.
So does that mean that if we, for instance, have some hundreds of PDFs that we need to be able to serve up, leaving them in the files is fine, or should we look at a different place to store those?
That's kind of a conversation that it came up yesterday, and it's going to come up more and more. Is there's no reason. So unfortunately, it's not just a matter of getting the files in there, but the database has to be aware of those files. What the appropriate storage location is something that we need to evaluate. You definitely have a files location where you can store files on your site, and where that border is between, it's appropriate to store it on our site, or maybe you really should store it somewhere else. I think that's something that the advisory group is going to need to discuss, because do we want to become a file server as well as a website hosting? I don't know that we want to.
Where do we vote on that?
So the advisory group has actually just started. There have been some announcements about it. Those of you in the room who are part of the advisory group, please stand up and show yourselves. And I'm already standing. And in addition to Jim and Gabe, there's also Brent Engebretson is on the group with the AHC, and Blaine with CCE, and Rachel Lamb with CFANS. Yep, and we're really just in the forming part of our group, so there will probably be some more communications that will come out about how that's going to work. If you've missed any of the previous communications, the purpose of the advisory group is to help OIT understand community needs. Like if somebody comes and says, hey, I want a new module, help us to identify, is this a module that we want for the entire community, or is it something that somebody has to install locally? Help us understand whether or not we should be hosting files, or how many files we should be hosting, things along those lines.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah, I actually reserved the room till 2 because I actually have an online meeting that starts, well, a minute ago. But that's fine. I'm willing to be late to that meeting. So.
John mentioned features as a good potential topic. I'm looking for topic ideas for the upcoming months. So if you have any thoughts about things to get on the agenda, let me know, or post it. For the mix.
Do you think a theming primer would be an interesting topic? I don't want to put David on the spot, but at the Drupal lab yesterday, he kind of gave a quick demo on at least starting a theme. And
Be a little more polished than yesterday.
yes, that may not be a bad idea.